Out of all the intros throughout the Final Fantasy series, the opening cutscene for VIII is definitely my favorite. This never gets old. From the masterful soundtrack, the tone, the visuals, the way they tell the story of Squall and Cypher's rivalry without words, foreshadow what's to come, everything. It's the perfect setup to prepare you for what's to come in this absolutely crazy game. Oh, and by crazy, I'm not exaggerating. Because this is, quite literally, a game about legalized child soldiers with amnesia and sword guns who live in a blind, mobile high school, who must assassinate an evil sorceress from the future who wants to squash time itself like a pancake. Setting our protagonist, Squall, on a journey where he constantly finds himself traveling backwards in time involuntarily into the body of his father, only to eventually go to space and travel to the future with his ragtag group of friends, and also hook up with his father's ex-girlfriend Squall, who has the ability to cause explosions by launching the dog at people with projectiles. Oh yeah, did I also mention that this game has dinosaurs and aliens in it too? Okay, I get it. That's a lot to take in. How about we slow down a little and take things back to basics? Welcome one and all to my video on one of my favorite games in the Final Fantasy franchise, Final Fantasy VIII. Let's dive in. For those who might not have much knowledge on the Final Fantasy franchise, or this entry in particular, VIII is considered by some to be the black sheep of the franchise. Either that or 13, depends on who you ask. Sure, FF8 got great reviews and critical acclaim at the time, but there seems to be a lot of fans who didn't like this game as much as the others, and as a result it has become quite polarizing. Prior to its release, Final Fantasy VII had completely blown the gaming world away, receiving widespread critical acclaim and leaving an impactful mark on the gaming landscape that to this very day has refused to fade away. So many people consider VII to be the greatest game ever made, or at least consider it to be one of the top video games of all time. Suffice to say, VII was quite influential for the time, introducing many to the franchise, and it has remained influential ever since the creation of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, which introduced even more fans to the franchise, such as myself. Made up of various spin-off games, books, a feature film, and of course the trilogy of remakes that we're currently getting. So, as you can imagine, VIII had a lot to live up to. But instead of continuing with what made VII so successful, it seemed like the developers decided to steer VIII into a slightly more unconventional direction. Many aspects of the game had left players confused, such as the junction and drawing systems, which I will get into later, enemies that scale with your level, and hell, even the story. I mean, come on, I shouldn't have to tell you how overly eccentric the game's story is, after how I summarized it in my opening. It should go without saying that there are a lot of Final Fantasy fans who either couldn't get into VIII or just downright hate it with a passion. There are also a lot of fans who love this game, and without a doubt, I am one of them. In my personal case, it might have helped that when I first played FF8, I had no idea that this game was so polarizing and considered to be a black sheep. So I got the opportunity to play this game without being influenced by any outside opinions. I was mainly just thinking, well, I like Final Fantasy, and Squall looks dope as hell, and now, yeah, sure, why not buy it? Though it took me a while to get into the game, eventually I found myself growing to really adore it and wanting to push through to see the ending. Now, not only is Squall one of my favorite Final Fantasy characters, but VIII has become my most played Final Fantasy outside of 14. Because, you know, 14 is an MMO, and naturally MMOs require you to sink hundreds of thousands of hours of your life into them. Like, holy shit, no way in hell will any other Final Fantasy game ever top the ungodly amount of hours I've invested into 14, Jesus Christ. So, you must be wondering, what is it about VIII that I love so much? Why have I returned to 8 more than any other game in the franchise? Why do I enjoy certain aspects of this game that others seem to hate? Well, let's discuss. The art direction is one of the game's elements that I like the most, which is why I've chosen to start with this. Final Fantasy VIII has some of my favorite designs in the entire franchise. Its most famous examples are probably the Revolver Gunblade and Squall's Pendant, both of which I've grown to love over time. My character's job in Final Fantasy XIV is a gunbreaker, because of how much FF8 made me love gunblades. And I also had my character exclusively use the Revolver Gunblade that comes with the Collector's Edition for the Shadowbringers expansion. Yup, that's literally my only reason for picking up the Collector's Edition, just for Squall's Gunblade. Totally worth the extra $40. That was until I unlocked the Weathered Lionheart at level 80. Though, I think my favorite gunblade in the entire game is Squall's ultimate weapon, the Lionheart, as I love the blue blade, which makes it look very lightsaber-ish in appearance. I tend to use that on all of my playthroughs and try to unlock it as early as I can. But regardless of my love for the Lionheart, I'm still extremely fond of his default Revolver Gunblade. I also love Squall's Pendant, as well as his matching ring named Griever, so much so that I own the replicas for them. I have the original version of the pendant and also the Dissidia variant. Another thing I love is a lot of the locations in the game. I find them to be quite memorable, and a lot of them have a very quaint, cozy feel to them. This is also part of the reason why I like Final Fantasy III a lot. I find that game to be very cozy and comfy to play due to its atmosphere. My favorite examples from FF8 in particular are the towns Balam and Windhill. I also really like the designs for Balam Garden and Esthar City. Like, holy shit, they are extra as hell, and I kinda love it. If they ever remake 8, I would love to see those two locations brought to life the most. Though I suppose in the case of Balam Garden, we already saw what a modern version of that place might look like with the spin-off game for phones, Mobius Final Fantasy. I remember that game being quite fun actually before it was shut down, rest in peace. Though out of all the Final Fantasy mobile games that have shut down, I think I miss Record Keeper the most. Other standout locations for me would have to be Artemisia's castle, where the game's final battle takes place, the lunatic Pandora, and the lunar base you visit when Squall and Renoa go to space. Speaking of space, the spaceship you find during that point in the game, the Ragnarok, is also a design I find really cool. Again, in a hypothetical FF8 remake, I would also love to see how they bring the Ragnarok to life in a new and interesting way. Character designs in this game are also something that I have a huge soft spot for. My favorite without a doubt is Squall. I feel like his design suits him and his personality rather perfectly. Also, I like wearing leather jackets in real life, so, you know, that's a plus from me. Other favorites of mine are the outfits worn by Sypha, Renoa, Laguna, and Adia. Also, gotta love Irvine's bitchin' cowboy hat. I gotta say though, I kinda prefer Squall's original look featured in this game over his new appearance in Dissidia and all of the other spin-off games, which has become his default in all of the games and merchandise since. I get that his original look was very 90s and they probably wanted to update it for a modern age, but I still think the original version holds up really well, whereas the new outfit just feels a tad over-designed. Anyway, tangent aside, I'd say the overall art direction in this game is pretty solid, and it has such a charming feel to it that I can't help but feel fondness towards it. However, I feel like what truly elevates the game's aesthetic and story is this game's masterful soundtrack. Where do I even begin? I don't think any game in this franchise has a bad soundtrack. I love a lot of the music throughout these games, from 3, 4, 7, 13, 14, 15, and of course, 8. The theme that plays during the opening cutscene, Liberi Fatali, is one of the most prominent standouts and also a favourite of mine. The title is Latin for Fated Children, referring to the game's cast of characters who are around the age of 17 to 18. The lyrics to this theme are also in Latin, and they reference the fact that the childhood innocence of these characters are now gone. The other most notable theme for this game is a love song titled Eyes on Me, sung by famous Hong Kong singer-songwriter VIII. The idea for this song came about during the development of VII, where the developers originally planned to use a famous vocalist for the ending of that game, but the plan didn't go through. Their idea was recycled for VIII when they decided that they wanted the game to feature a song with meaning in regards to the plot. They chose VIII as the vocalist because they believed her voice matched their image for the song, and Eyes on Me went on to become the first video game song to ever win Song of the Year at the 4th Annual Japan Golden Disc Awards. I'll admit that when I first got into this game, I didn't really like the song. I recognized that it was a very well made and performed song, but the truth of the matter was that it just didn't appeal to me that much, because it wasn't the type of music I usually like listening to. However, over time, the song has really grown on me, and now I really like it. Oh, and another standout track from this game? The Man with the Machine Gun. I don't even need to say anything, just listen to it. This slaps so goddamn hard, and if you don't like it, then I'm sorry, but you are fundamentally and factually wrong on all levels. Now all of that's out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. I usually like talking about the gameplay first when it comes to these sorts of videos, but I wanted to talk about other aspects of the game first, as they are what I've found to be the most memorable. VIII is similar to most other games in the franchise, as it is focused around turn-based gameplay. But at the same time, it is also very different to the other games. This is due to the scaled leveling, where as you level up, all of the enemies in the game level up with you. The lower level you are, the easier the game will be. The higher level you are, the harder it will be. You can't grind out a bunch of levels and kill all of your enemies in one shot. They will always equally match you. This aspect of the game is something that players either love or hate. I feel pretty neutral on it personally, but a lot of other people are really turned off by it. You really have to play the game tactically with a lot of thought put in, utilizing the game's junction system to the best of your abilities. So, how does the junction system work? I'm not going to get too deep into it, but it involves the use of guardian forces, often abbreviated as GFs, which are this game's version of summons. Using the junction system, you can junction these guardian forces to any member of your party, making them more powerful and allowing them to use magic. You can acquire magic in this game by drawing them from enemies and then either casting it or storing it. You can also junction certain types of magic to a party member's stat. As you can probably imagine, this can get very time-consuming and admittedly boring, constantly drawing magic from enemies for each individual party member. Though it's made a lot easier now than it used to be, as the Steam release of the original game, as well as the remaster, have cheats mapped to the function keys, which can not only speed things up in order to save time, but also assist you with the trickier aspects of this game, such as the battle assist, which gives you maximum HP and the ability to use limit breaks almost all of the time, and also disable random encounters. These cheats don't make you entirely invincible, but they do make a difference if you want to get through the game but are struggling with understanding certain aspects of its gameplay. Though I recommend trying to play without them, especially if it's your first playthrough. Like I said before, I feel kinda neutral towards this sort of gameplay. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. But if there's one aspect of this gameplay that I definitely love, Triple Triad. Triple Triad is one of my favorite mini-games in any video game ever. It is this super addictive collectible card game that you can play with various NPCs you meet throughout the course of your journey. Once I learned how Triple Triad worked, I was immediately hooked. To play Triple Triad, you must play on a card mat with 9 slots for your cards to be placed on. You and your opponent must draw 5 cards from your decks. Each card is double-sided, with one side being red and the other blue, each color representing each player. Each card also has 4 numbers on both sides. Someone will be randomly chosen to go first, and they will have to place a card down. The numbers on the card, facing any of the directions, are trying to attack other cards on the mat. So if I put a card on the corner, that means the opponent must capture that card using numbers on their card that are higher than the numbers on the south and east sides of my card. Once you've taken over an opponent's card, it defends your spot on the mat. If the opponent puts a card with a lower number next to it, nothing happens. But if they put a card with a higher number next to it, then they can take their card back. In order to win Triple Triad, you must have as many of your cards on the mat as possible before all 9 slots are filled up. Whoever has the most cards on the mat, or whoever has taken over the most cards by the end of the round, wins the game. This card game is so much fun. It's one of my favorite parts of 8, and I absolutely love that they brought it over to 14. Triple Triad can often get a lot more complicated though. Everything I've mentioned so far are just the basics. Each region in this game has their own variations on Triple Triad's rules, which from a world building standpoint is a really cool idea. Like in-universe, this card game is so popular and has been around for so long that different places all throughout the world have their own unique ways of playing this game. But from a gameplay standpoint, wow, it can get super confusing sometimes. A lot of these rule variations are just awful and very frustrating. I personally feel like Triple Triad is at its best when the rules are kept simple. Some of these rule variations are just too confusing to get into, so I'm not going to explain them here. I'm sure there's another video out there somewhere which could explain them way better than I could. Regardless, however, I still really love Triple Triad. A part of me kinda wishes it appeared in more Final Fantasy games, but at least they included it in 14. Arguably, that's for the best. I'd probably just play Triple Triad more than the actual Final Fantasy games themselves if that were the case. Okay, now let's talk about the story and characters. There is a lot to get into, so let's just ease into things and give you a general idea on what the story is like. The protagonist is Squall Leonhardt, a 17-year-old introspective orphan training to become a mercenary at a school named Balam Garden. Squall is kind of a loner, keeping to himself due to abandonment issues stemming from his childhood, often coming across as cold, distant, and standoffish. He is a very quiet character too, often narrating his thoughts and feelings rather than outwardly expressing himself, which helps give the player a more intimate understanding of Squall as a character. He fears getting close to other people due to his childhood abandonment issues, acting cold and standoffish as a way to prevent himself from getting close to anyone for fear of losing them. As you might have already guessed, his character arc throughout the story is all about learning to overcome that fear, open up more, finally let people get close to him and become a part of his life. And the one character throughout the story who plays a huge role in that is none other than Rinoa Hartley. Unlike other games in the franchise, 8 is specifically centered around a love story between these two characters. Rinoa is a stark contrast to Squall, a very extroverted, outgoing, warm, playful, and friendly person. She initially dislikes Squall, but over the course of the story becomes more and more fond of him, helping him break out of his shell little by little, as do the rest of Squall's companions throughout the story, but Rinoa out of all the other characters is the main foil for him. The main conflict of the narrative is that there is a sadistic sorceress named Adia, who Squall and his companions are tasked with assassinating. Simple, right? Well, not exactly. Turns out Adia is actually pretty chill. She was the matron of the orphanage Squall and the rest of the characters, besides Rinoa, grew up in. They just don't remember her, nor their childhoods, as they're suffering from memory loss, a side effect due to their usage of guardian forces, monsters that they summon in order to assist them in battle. So how did Adia, a gentle, compassionate woman who raised all of these children, become so evil? Turns out, She has been possessed by another sorceress from the future named Artemisia, who desires to become a living god by compressing all of time and space, assimilating all of creation into her, then using her powers to recreate everything according to her desires. Her motivation for doing this is because in the world of FF8, sorceresses are ostracized, feared, and hunted, suffering from prejudice and scrutiny. Not only is this something that Artemisia has no doubt experienced throughout her life, but she is also very aware of the fact that Squall will one day travel to the future and kill her, as it is written in history. So basically, Artemisia is just trying to protect herself and survive by using time compression to avoid her fate. I find Artemisia to be a very interesting antagonist. She is malevolent, hateful, and power-hungry, but only because she has been mistreated and persecuted by others throughout her entire life. She commits acts of evil and cruelty in order to save herself from Squall, but ultimately, those actions of hers are what causes her to become targeted by Squall in the first place, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Alongside Squall's story, we also experience the story of Laguna Lore, his father. Throughout the course of the game, Squall and his friends are involuntarily sent back in time into the bodies of Laguna and his friends back when they were younger. This is due to Squall's estranged stepsister Alone using her mysterious supernatural abilities in order to try and change the past. Laguna is probably one of my favorite characters from this game. Compared to Squall, who is a brooding loner, Laguna is optimistic and cheerful, coming across as a lovable goofball of a man. Also, his theme song is The Man with the Machine Gun, and that instantly bumps him up to being at least an A-tier character. I dare you to change my mind. Laguna's journey in the past ties into the main storyline in the present, and I think the best part about that is that it offers more clarity regarding the game's story that isn't really explored much in the present day. Even going as far as to offer some backstory as to why the song Eyes on Me was created in-universe, as it was the song Renoa's mother wrote after falling in love with Laguna. Though they were never able to be together, it's kind of poetic that their children ended up together instead, and the song went on to define their relationship. As much as I really enjoy the story and all of the themes that are in it, I understand why it might not be for everyone. It sounds like it confused a lot of people, and many felt like it didn't flesh out certain things as well as they might have liked. But personally, I still think it's a great story. I know I've already spoiled a lot of the story, but I think I will end my thoughts regarding it here. I still want to leave some things up for surprise, just in case you're someone who might not have played this game before, but is interested in giving it a try. Final Fantasy VIII is probably not for everyone. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it, or perhaps you are somewhere in the middle. Either way, regardless of any flaws the game may have, I still believe that it is a fantastic, great experience that immerses you into a very charming and likable world with iconic characters difficult to forget. There is a lot to love about Final Fantasy VIII, and hopefully with this video, you'll see why someone like me really appreciates this game and still likes to go back to it every now and then. It's different compared to most of the other Final Fantasy games, sure, but that's part of what I like about it. It is a truly memorable experience that has stuck with me for years after my first playthrough. But that's enough of my thoughts. What do you think of Final Fantasy VIII? Have you played it before? Feel free to leave a comment below and don't forget to like the video. And with that, I will see you in the next video.